I was very serious about this.
And
do you feel
more fulfilled now?
Oh, yes, yes. Certainly I feel a great sense of responsibility has been imparted to me. And I feel also a great sense of strength has been given to me that I felt I didn't have before. And certainly I struggle, but after this experience, I just feel like a totally new person in a much better way. I mean, I still have joy, I still have suffering, I still have to go through each day as it comes, but I just have the strength of Christ within me, and I hope I'm not too bold in saying that, but I really do feel His presence, and I could not deny that in my life.
It's so wonderful to hear your story.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
And, stay with us, because Father Hopko is going to be back and talk about how you can get some assistance, talk about what you can do on your journey.
Why is Easter celebrated on a different Sunday each year? Jesus Christ's passion and resurrection occurred during the Jewish Passover. Therefore, Christians follow the Jewish calendar and celebrate Easter on the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. The Orthodox also take seriously the ancient rule that the Christian Passover must follow the Jewish feast and not precede it. So in some years, it may fall much later than in others.
I'm John Righetti, and we're speaking with renowned Orthodox theologian Father Thomas Hopko. Father, Clement's journey, was that a typical one?
I would say that all those journeys are basically the same, but everyone is different because people are unique. There are no two people at all who are the same. Everyone has a unique face, a unique time, place, life, so it'll always be different. It's like sanctity. Every saint is different, but in the general way, they are the same. They all have to love, but each one loves uniquely. Everyone has to search, but each one searches uniquely, given their own conditions, their own providence, their own story. So I would say, yeah, when you hear what Clement is saying, you could say, yes, I've heard that over and again, especially the element of the desire, the search, the sense of unease, and then all of a sudden this clicking, this is it. I would want to say, though, he used the word feeling, and I'd like to comment on that a bit, because when most Americans hear feeling, they think of something emotional or something, I don't know, bells or something like that. And I think that what Clement was talking about, which you find everywhere, I think the better word perhaps would be, I should talk with Clement about it, would be a kind of sense of conviction, a sense of certitude. It's kind of an intuition, like, that's it. It isn't like an emotional feeling, like all of a sudden. And even he did mention tears, which, by the way, in the tradition, it claims if you can't cry, you can't be saved. Jesus wept 3 times. But there is this just sense of being grasped, of being convinced, of kind of finding it, that does break your heart. And it's interesting that in Scripture, the sacrifice to God is a broken heart. I like to say about liturgy that it has only one purpose, to break your heart. To break your heart over the splendid mercy and beauty and glory of God and your own littleness, your own creatureliness, your own miserableness. But you put those two things together, and I think that's what happens every time. But it happens uniquely in various people. Also, it's interesting that, Quaylen and Clement were using orthodoxy. But in fact, what he said was he found Christ. You see, orthodoxy sometimes can function like, a thing in itself, some kind of thing called orthodoxy. But orthodoxy really is just, we claim, the gospel. It's the truth about God. It's how things are. Some people don't like that word orthodoxy. It sounds arrogant or whatever. But all it means is God as God is, Christ as Christ is. And that can sound arrogant. However, if a person has that experience, nothing in heaven and earth is going to make them change their conviction about it. But I think it is a conviction. And here I'd like to give me a chance to say one more thing, John. This is, I think, one of the most important points that we could possibly ever make in our time now. C.S. Lewis, a great Christian writer from England, in 1944 wrote a book called The Abolition of Man. And he said that every culture, philosophical, religious, had this intuition of reality, of truth, that it was a faculty that makes us human. He said, if we don't have that faculty, then we're nothing but a brain and a body. We're a reasoning being with sense experience. But he claimed, and I won't go into the details of it, maybe another program we can, how modern education, even grammar teaching in schools, is eroding that intuition from a person. And he says when that happens, people aren't human anymore. They're just a combination of a brain and a body. I like to say a computer and a consumer. Sometimes I even like to say a calculator and a copulator. But that's all we are without that intuition. And I think what Clement testified to was he's still a human being because he had this intuition.
That intuition is what he described as feeling.
Yeah, that's where he was using the verb feeling, which some people could think. For example, the term heart in the Bible. When we Americans say heart, we usually think, like, who was it who said, the heart has reasons, the mind doesn't know, and so on. Well, that's not very biblical, and it's certainly not very Orthodox. It's certainly not very Eastern Christian, because the Eastern tradition, Eastern Christianity, which is much closer to Judaism in that sense, the heart is that place inside you where God testifies to himself. It's that faculty of intuiting that gives you the axioms upon which you reason. But our modern Western world doesn't know this particular faculty practically at all. It's just reasoning on the brain like a calculator. Well, even Plato said a long time ago, that's a secondary action of the mind. The nous in Greek, which is the heart, the lop in Hebrew, that's that intuition upon which you can then have a conversation. You can then reason, you can talk, you can even argue. You can argue with a Buddhist, for example, because you have a kind of intuition. I taught summer school a couple times at a Buddhist college in Colorado. It was a wonderful experience. And Buddhism, of course, is non-theistic. But in any case, there is a foundation in which a give and take can take place. And I think that in our modern world, by this subjectivization and the losing of this intuition, then you just have, reasoning beings with sense experiencing, following their own experiences. And so then this desire for truth, for God, people don't even know what you're talking about.
So if in our secularized society, if this trend is continuing, then how do I find God? I mean, if this intuition is being numbed, if you will, how does someone like Clement or me or anyone who is, how do I find God?
Well, C.S. Lewis, I think, would have claimed, we can be no longer human. It's possible. Now, we Orthodox might be a little more positive and say, well, no, there's always that element there that you can appeal to, that can break through, that God is there. We're kind of optimistic. However, I think that some people like C.S. Lewis would say, for example, when he was describing this phenomenon in this book called The Abolition of Man, highly recommend it. It's a tough book. I read it 6 times. I still don't understand it. It's only this thin. But when he said, and someone may say to me that you are calling these people evil or wicked, that they're a bad man. And he said, no, I'm not. What I am saying is they are no longer men, at least in the classical understanding of what it meant to be human. Because we're not just a combination of a ghost and a corpse, as my theology teacher said, or a brain and a body. We are an incarnate spirit who has this quality of knowing God, of knowing truth, of rejoicing in it. That's what makes us alive.
But then if I'm not going to be fully human, I have to find God.
Yes.
I have to find
Oh,
Him.
absolutely. I mean, Christians would definitely. And I would even go further. I would say a little more general. I think even all what you might call classical religions, Buddhism, Taoism, whatever they would be, Judaism, would all say something like that. Even if you have Buddhism, which is non-theistic and basically philosophical, it is not like Christianity in the sense that God speaks and so on. It's a hunger and thirst of Gautama sitting there for 4,000 years. But they would all say that the goal is to find the truth of things. to be authentic, to be real, you see. And here, if we wanted to be really optimistic, I mean, certainly the Christian fathers, the Eastern Church fathers would say, the Holy Spirit and God and the image of God, who is Christ, is acting in all cultures. You know, in some kind of anonymous manner, because we are creatures made in God's image. And so love and truth and beauty, these are qualities of God himself, we Christians would say, even though the Dalai Lama might say, well, we don't believe in a personal God. But we can say, okay, Your Eminence, but let's talk about truth, reality, life, grace, and then we can have a conversation. We can really have a conversation, sure. You know. So I think that's important.
And if I've not yet lost this intuition, this intuitive piece of me that begins the search, how do I begin that search? If I still am human, if I still have this intuition, how do I begin my trek to find God?
Well, I would say, I would have to answer as a Christian now, and as an Orthodox Christian. I would say, I would repeat, the hunger and thirst for God any way you know how. So I would advise a person, pray. Now, you may say, well, I don't believe in God. So I'll say, okay, pray to whom it may concern. Say to God, if you are out there, or in here, because God is in here, not only out there, right? But if you are, do something with me, okay? So I would say some type of prayer, because prayer is basically search. And by the way, I would just like to quickly add, you mentioned about beginning. Well, all the saints say you're always a beginner. Just when you get it together, you start doing it all over again. You know what I mean? It never ends. There's always another level for in this search, you know, because God is even appearing different every day to us, because God is boundless. And in fact, in our tradition, we wouldn't even say that God exists. I had good conversations with Buddhists about this because they were against the idea of existing being. I say, well, we agree with you on that one, because our saints like Gregory Palamas would say, if God is, I'm not. If I am, God is not. But you can't speak about God as being. Being is a creaturely category. Yeah, it's a creaturely category. God is beyond being. In fact, our fathers even say God is beyond God. Hypertheos, Dionysius says, beyond divinity. But anyway, the hunger and thirst, the prayer, then I think we would also definitely say you have to practice silence. Yeah.
I'm sure we will need to continue this discussion.
I hope so.
I want to thank you so much for
You're
your
welcome.
time today and for your insights. It's been a very enriching discussion for us, and now I'd like to turn back to Kuei Lin.
Well, no one makes it as easy to understand as Father Tom Hopko. You know, if you'd like to learn more about the Orthodox faith, listen to Orthodoxy Now, the radio show on WEDO 810 on your AM dial on Wednesday mornings at 9:30. That's hosted by Father Stevo Rocknich. And be sure to watch Orthodoxy Now on Comcast On Demand. We hope you'll tune in then. And if you have a topic that you'd like to know about, send it to Orthodoxy Now, 3400 Dawson Street, Pittsburgh 15213. Thank you for joining us.